The whistle of the train pierced the crisp autumn air as it rolled into Silverton, Colorado, carrying Abigail Owens and her shattered dreams westward. Her hands trembled as they clutched the letter from Yancy Vaughn, the man who would soon be her husband, a man she had never met, but had promised her life to out of desperation and hope. The year was 1883, and Abigail had left behind the smoldering ruins of her family's farm in Pennsylvania after a fire that had claimed her parents and left her with a permanent limp, her right leg damaged when a burning beam had fallen across it. At 22, with no family and few prospects, becoming a mail-order bride had seemed like her only chance at a future. As the train slowed to a stop, Abigail gathered her single carpetbag and took a deep breath. The platform was bustling with miners, traders, and townspeople. She scanned the crowd for the tall, broad-shouldered man Yancy had described himself as in his letters that had been kind, straightforward, and mercifully free of flowery sentiments she wouldn't have believed anyway. A man stepped forward from the crowd, his hat in his hands, revealing dark hair with flecks of silver at the temples. His face was weathered, tanned by years under the Colorado sun, with deep creases around eyes that were a startling shade of blue. His shoulders were indeed broad beneath a worn but clean shirt, and he stood at least a head taller than most men around him. "Miss Owens?" he asked, his voice deep and rougher than she'd imagined. Abigail nodded, suddenly conscious of her wrinkled traveling dress and the way she had to shift her weight to her good leg after sitting for so long. "Mr. Vaughn," she said, extending her hand with as much dignity as she could muster. His handshake was firm but not crushing. "Welcome to Silverton." As she stepped forward, her bad leg buckled slightly, causing her to stumble. Yancy caught her elbow, steadying her with a strength that seemed effortless. "Thank you," she murmured, embarrassment heating her cheeks. His eyes flicked down to her leg and back to her face, his expression unreadable. "Let's get your things to the wagon." The walk to his wagon was excruciating, not for the physical pain. Abigail had learned to live with that, but for the slow, awkward pace she set as she tried to hide the severity of her limp. Each step felt like a confession, revealing the truth her letters had only hinted at. "You didn't mention the extent of your injury," Yancy said abruptly as he helped her into the wagon. Abigail's throat tightened. "I wrote that I was injured in a fire. You said you walked with a slight impediment. Is it a problem?" she asked, meeting his gaze directly. Yancy stared at her for a long moment, his expression stern. "I need a partner, Miss Owens, not a dancer. My ranch is 15 miles outside town. It's hard work, dawn till dusk, and I need someone who can pull their weight." The words stung, but Abigail lifted her chin. "I may not be fleet of foot, Mr. Vaughn, but I'm strong and I'm not afraid of hard work. I've managed on my own since the fire, and I can manage your ranch duties." Something flickered in his eyes, respect, perhaps, or simply surprise at her forthrightness. "We'll see," was all he said before climbing up beside her. The ride to Yancy's ranch was mostly silent. Abigail took in the breathtaking landscape, towering mountains framing vast meadows, aspen groves with leaves just beginning to turn gold. Despite her anxiety about what awaited her, she couldn't help but be moved by the wild beauty of this place. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Yancy glanced at her, then back at the road. "That it is beautiful and harsh. Winter's coming. First snow usually falls by mid-October." "I'm not afraid of winter either," Abigail said. He made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You Pennsylvania folks think you know winter. Colorado winter's a different beast altogether." The wagon rounded a bend, and suddenly the ranch came into view, a sturdy two-story house built of logs, a large barn, several outbuildings, and corrals where horses grazed. It wasn't grand, but it was substantial, speaking of years of hard work and careful planning. "This is Aspen Creek Ranch," Yancy said, a note of pride in his voice. "Built it myself, starting with just the cabin portion there, been adding to it for 12 years. "It's impressive," Abigail said sincerely. As they pulled up to the house, a large dog came bounding toward them, barking enthusiastically. Behind it came a boy of about 10, running to keep up. "That's Rex," Yancy said, "and my hand, Timothy. His father works the mine in town, but the boy prefers the ranch." Helps out after school and on weekends. Timothy skidded to a stop beside the wagon, his freckled face curious as he took in Abigail. Is this her, Mr. Vaughn, the lady from back east? Mind your manners, Timothy, Yancy said, though not unkindly. This is Miss Owens. Pleased to meet you, madam, Timothy said, tipping an imaginary hat. Hello, Timothy, Abigail smiled, warming to the boy's open face. Yancy helped her down from the wagon, his hands strong and sure around her waist. She tried not to lean on him too heavily, but her leg was stiff from the long journey. The interior of the house was surprisingly welcoming, clean and orderly, with simple but well-made furniture. A stone fireplace dominated the main room, and windows let in the late afternoon light. Kitchen's through there, Yancy said, gesturing. My room's downstairs. Yours is upstairs, first door on the right, bathrooms at the end of the hall, got running water, put that in 3 years ago. Abigail looked at the stairs with trepidation but said nothing. Timothy, bring Miss Owens's bag up to her room, Yancy instructed. To Abigail, he said, I've got to see to the horses. Supper's at 6. Left alone, Abigail sank onto a chair, the reality of her situation hitting her fully. She was in the middle of nowhere, with a man who already seemed disappointed in her, facing a life of hard work that her body might not be able to handle. But what choice did she have? There was no going back. With a deep breath, she stood and made her way to the kitchen. If she was to be a partner, not a burden, she would start by preparing a meal that would show Yancy Vaughn she wasn't useless. The kitchen was well-stocked: flour, sugar, coffee, beans, and to her surprise, a side of bacon hanging in the adjacent pantry. She found potatoes in a bin and onions hanging in a net. By the time Yancy returned, she had a hearty stew simmering and biscuits in the oven. He paused in the doorway, surprise evident on his face. You didn't have to cook tonight. I wanted to, Abigail said, wiping her hands on a cloth. I thought we might as well know right away if my cooking meets your standards. A hint of a smile touched his lips. It smells good. They ate mostly in silence, with Timothy providing occasional chatter about the day's events: a hawk he'd spotted, a new foal in the neighbor's pasture. Abigail noticed that despite his gruff exterior, Yancy listened to the boy with genuine interest, asking questions and nodding at the answers. After Timothy left for home, Yancy showed Abigail around the house more thoroughly, explaining the routine of the ranch and what would be expected of her. The list was long: cooking, cleaning, laundry, tending the vegetable garden, helping with the animals, and more. I can do all of that, she said firmly when he finished, though doubt gnawed at her. Yancy studied her for a long moment. We'll marry at the end of the week if things seem suitable to both of us. Pastor comes through on Sundays. Abigail nodded. It was a business arrangement after all. That seems reasonable. That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the strange sounds of the Colorado night, Abigail allowed herself a moment of doubt. Had she made a terrible mistake? Yancy Vaughn was not unkind, but he was reserved, almost stern. There was no warmth between them, no spark of the kind of love she had once dreamed of, but dreams were luxuries she could no longer afford. She needed a home, security, a purpose. If she could prove her worth to Yancy, perhaps respect could grow between them. That would have to be enough. The next morning, Abigail rose before dawn, determined to prove herself useful. By the time Yancy came in from the early chores, she had coffee brewing and breakfast nearly ready. He paused, clearly surprised to find her already up and working. You're an early riser. Farm life, she said simply, setting a plate of eggs and bacon before him. Over the next few days, Abigail threw herself into the work of the ranch, ignoring the pain in her leg that grew worse with each passing hour. She cooked meals, scrubbed floors, learned the names and temperaments of the horses, and even helped Timothy gather eggs from the henhouse. Yancy watched her, saying little, but she could feel his eyes on her when she struggled up the stairs at night or winced when she thought no one was looking. On the 4th day, a fierce storm blew in from the mountains, bringing lashing rain that turned the yard into a muddy quagmire. Abigail was hanging laundry on the covered porch when she saw Yancy running from the barn, leading 2 frightened horses. Without thinking, she set down her basket and hurried as fast as her leg would allow to help him. The rain soaked her instantly, and the mud made each step treacherous. She reached for the lead rope of the second horse, a nervous bay that was fighting Yancy's grip. "I've got him," she called over the howl of the wind. As she took the rope, the horse reared, panicked by a crack of lightning. Abigail lost her footing in the mud and went down hard, pain lancing through her bad leg. The horse bolted, but Yancy managed to maintain his hold on both animals. "Abigail," he shouted the first time he had used her given name. She tried to stand, but her leg wouldn't support her. The rain poured down, plastering her dress to her skin and washing mud into her eyes. Suddenly, strong arms were around her, lifting her. Yancy carried her to the house as if she weighed nothing, his face a mask of concern and something else she couldn't name. Inside, he set her gently on the sofa. "Where does it hurt?" "Everywhere," she admitted with a grimace. "But I'll be fine. The horses, Timothy's got them." "You should have stayed inside. I saw you needed help." Yancy ran a hand through his wet hair, leaving it standing in spikes. "You could have been trampled." "But I wasn't." His eyes narrowed. "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met." "Thank you," she said, and to her surprise, he laughed a real laugh that transformed his face, softening the hard lines and lighting his eyes. "That wasn't necessarily a compliment. I choose to take it as one." They looked at each other for a long moment, something new and fragile forming between them. Then Yancy cleared his throat. "Let me get you some dry clothes." That evening, with Abigail's leg elevated on a pillow, they talked for the first time. Yancy told her about coming west as a young man, working in the mines until he saved enough to buy a small plot of land, then building the ranch piece by piece. She told him about growing up on her family's farm, about the fire that had taken everything, and her determination to build a new life. "You're braver than I give you credit for," Yancy said quietly. "Most people are if they're given the chance to show it," Abigail replied. The next day, Abigail's leg was too swollen and painful to walk on. Frustrated tears threatened as she tried and failed to get out of bed unassisted. A knock at the door startled her. "Abigail, may I come in?" "Yes," she called, hastily wiping her eyes. Yancy entered carrying a tray with breakfast and coffee. "Thought you might be hungry." The simple kindness undid her composure. "I'm sorry," she said, voice breaking. "I'm trying not to be useless." He set the tray down and sat on the edge of the bed. "You're not useless, you're injured, there's a difference. But you need a partner, not a dancer," he finished for her. "I remember what I said, it was unkind, it was honest." Yancy sighed, looking troubled. "Maybe too honest. I've been alone a long time, Abigail. I'm not good at people. You seem to do well enough with Timothy." A smile touched his lips. "Timothy's easy. He just wants to learn about horses and hear stories about when I was a Pony Express rider." "You were a Pony Express rider?" Abigail asked, impressed despite herself. "For a short time when I was barely 18, not long before the telegraph put us all out of business." He handed her a cup of coffee. "Drink this before it gets cold." As she sipped the strong, hot brew, Abigail studied Yancy's profile. There was a gentleness to him she hadn't noticed before, hidden beneath the weathered exterior. "I think I'd like to hear those stories too," she said softly. He glanced at her, surprise and something warmer in his eyes. "Maybe I'll tell you someday." For the next 2 days, Yancy insisted that Abigail rest her leg. He brought her meals, books from his small collection, and even flowers Timothy had picked. In the evenings, he sat with her, sharing stories of his early days in Colorado and listening as she spoke of her life back east. By Sunday, Abigail's leg had improved enough that she could walk with only a little more difficulty than usual. The pastor was due that afternoon, and she dressed carefully in her best dress, a simple blue cotton that brought out the gold in her brown eyes. Yancy knocked on her door just as she was pinning up her hair. "May I come in?" When she called her assent, he entered, looking uncharacteristically nervous. He had shaved and his dark hair was neatly combed. He wore a clean shirt and what appeared to be his best trousers. "Pastor Williams will be here in an hour," he said, hands fidgeting at his sides. "I'll be ready," Abigail assured him. "Abigail," he began, then stopped, seemed to gather his thoughts. "I want to be sure, that is, I need to know if you still want this. The marriage." She stilled, hairpin poised in midair. "Do you not want it anymore?" "That's not what I said." He ran a hand through his hair, disrupting its neat arrangement. I I know I'm not what most women dream of. I'm older than you by 12 years, she interrupted. That's hardly ancient. I'm set in my ways. The ranch is isolated, especially in winter, and I can't promise to be what you might hope for in a husband. Abigail set down the hairpin and turned to face him fully. What do you think I hope for? The question seemed to catch him off guard. I don't know, romance, tenderness, things I'm not sure I know how to give. His honesty touched her. Yancy, when I answered your advertisement, I hoped for safety and security. A roof over my head and honest work to do. You've provided those things. She hesitated, then added softly, but these past few days I've begun to hope for more. Not flowers and poetry, but companionship, understanding. The kind we've started to find. Something in Yancy's face softened, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before showing through. I'd like that too. The wedding was simple, just Abigail, Yancy, Timothy and his parents, and a few neighbors gathered in the ranch house's main room. Pastor Williams was a kind-faced man who spoke of partnership and respect, of building a life together day by day. When it came time for the vows, Yancy's voice was steady as he promised to protect and provide for Abigail. When it was her turn, she looked directly into his blue eyes and promised to stand by him, to work alongside him, to build a home with him. You may kiss your bride, Pastor Williams said. Yancy hesitated, then leaned down to press a gentle, almost tentative kiss to Abigail's lips. It was brief, but she felt a warmth spread through her at the contact. The small gathering shared a meal Abigail had prepared the day before, with Timothy's mother contributing a cake for the occasion. As twilight fell, the guests departed, leaving the newlyweds alone for the first time as husband and wife. An awkward silence fell between them as Yancy closed the door behind the last guest. Abigail busied herself clearing away plates, suddenly nervous. Leave those, Yancy said. They can wait till morning. She set down the plates she was holding, unsure what to do with her hands. All right, Yancy cleared his throat. I've moved my things to the larger bedroom upstairs, I thought. Well, it seemed proper now that we're married. But if you'd prefer your own room for now, I understand. Abigail felt heat rise to her cheeks. I think I would like to share a room, as husband and wife. Relief and something else, desire, perhaps flickered in Yancy's eyes. I'd like that too. That night, as Yancy's strong arms held her close, Abigail realized that she had found something she hadn't dared to hope for, not just security, but the beginning of love. The weeks that followed were a time of adjustment and discovery. They learned each other's habits and preferences, negotiated the sharing of space and duties, and gradually fell into a rhythm that suited them both. Yancy insisted on making changes around the ranch to accommodate Abigail's leg, adding a railing to the stairs, moving frequently used items to lower shelves, building a mounting block by the corral so she could more easily get on a horse. Each thoughtful modification told her more clearly than words that he accepted her fully, limp and all. As autumn deepened into winter, the ranch became increasingly isolated. The first heavy snow fell in early November, blanketing the landscape in pristine white and making travel to town difficult. But inside the ranch house, warmth and contentment grew. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, Yancy carving or working on ranch accounts while Abigail sewed or read aloud from one of his books. Sometimes they simply talked, sharing thoughts and memories, dreams and fears. One such evening, as a blizzard howled outside, Abigail set aside her mending and said, I never thanked you properly. Yancy looked up, puzzled. For what? For choosing me, for giving me a chance despite. She gestured at her leg. He set down his carving knife. Abigail, I didn't do you any favor. You've more than proven your worth here. Even though I'm not as quick or strong as someone else might be, Yancy moved to sit beside her, taking her hands in his. You're exactly what I needed, though I was too stubborn to see it at first. You bring life and warmth to this place. You make it a home, not just a house. He hesitated, then said quietly, I think I was half in love with you by the end of that first week, watching you fight to prove yourself, completely in love by the time we married. Tears sprang to Abigail's eyes. It was the first time either of them had spoken of love. I love you too, she whispered. So much more than I thought possible when I stepped off that train. His kiss was tender at first, then deepened with a passion that still surprised and delighted her. Later, lying in each other's arms, Abigail marveled at how far they had come from their first awkward meeting. Winter passed in a peaceful rhythm of work and companionship. By spring, Abigail had fully settled into life at Aspen Creek Ranch, her presence transforming not just the house now brightened with curtains she had sewn and flowers she had planted, but Yancy himself. The stern, solitary man who had met her at the station had softened, learning to smile more readily and even to laugh, as the snow melted and the first green shoots appeared in Abigail's expanded garden. She made an important discovery. For weeks, she had been feeling unusually tired, with bouts of morning sickness she had tried to hide from Yancy. Finally, she could deny the truth no longer she was with child. She waited until evening to tell him, after they had finished supper and were sitting together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold. "Yancy," she began, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nervousness, "I have something to tell you." He turned to look at her, concern immediately crossing his features. "Are you all right? You've been pale lately." Abigail smiled, touched by his perceptiveness. "I'm more than all right. We're going to have a baby." For a moment, Yancy simply stared at her, his expression blank with shock. Then, to her amazement, tears welled in his eyes. "A baby," he repeated, his voice rough with emotion. "Our baby." He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of glass. "When? Late autumn, I think. November, maybe. Just before winter," he murmured. "We'll need to prepare." The doctor in town, Abigail, placed a finger against his lips, smiling at his immediate shift to practical concerns. "We have time. Right now, I just want to enjoy this moment with you." Yancy's hand moved to rest gently on her still flat stomach. "I never thought I'd have this," he admitted softly. "A family of my own." "Neither did I after the fire," Abigail said. "I thought I'd lost any chance at happiness." He cupped her face in his hands. "You deserve all the happiness in the world, Abigail Vaughn." The months of Abigail's pregnancy brought changes to the ranch. Yancy hired a young man named Samuel to help with the heavier work, freeing Abigail from tasks that became increasingly difficult as her body changed. He also insisted on bringing Dr. Miller out from town monthly to check on her progress, despite the expense. Timothy was delighted by the news, appointing himself the baby's protector and bringing small treasures. He found a perfectly round stone, a hawk's feather, as gifts for the child. As her due date approached, Yancy's protective instincts intensified. He rarely left her side, delegating ranch work to Samuel and hovering anxiously whenever Abigail so much as stood up from a chair. "You're going to wear yourself out with worry before the baby even arrives," she teased one evening as he insisted on rubbing her swollen feet. "I can't help it," he admitted. "The thought of anything happening to you or the baby." Abigail stroked his hair, understanding his fear. "We'll be fine. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "Not my baby," he said softly. "Not my wife. The baby came 2 weeks early during the first snowfall of the season." Abigail's labor began just after midnight, waking her from a sound sleep with a sharp pain that took her breath away. "Yancy," she gasped, shaking his shoulder. "It's time." He was instantly alert, leaping from bed to light the lamp. "I'll send Samuel for the doctor." The next 12 hours were a blur of pain and waiting. Dr. Miller arrived just as the contractions were reaching their peak, bringing his wife, a skilled midwife, with him. Yancy paced outside the bedroom door, flinching at each of Abigail's cries. When at last the piercing wail of a newborn cut through the air, he nearly collapsed with relief. Mrs. Miller opened the door, her face tired but smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Vaughn, and your wife is just fine." Yancy entered the room on shaky legs. Abigail lay propped against pillows, her hair damp with sweat but her face radiant as she cradled a small bundle against her chest. "Come meet your son," she said, her voice hoarse but filled with joy. Yancy approached the bed as if in a dream. The baby was tiny, with a shock of dark hair and a red, wrinkled face that somehow already showed hints of Yancy's strong features. "He's perfect," Yancy whispered, gently touching his son's miniature hand. To his amazement, the baby's fingers curled around his, holding on with surprising strength. "What shall we call him?" Abigail asked. Yancy thought for a moment. How about James? After your father, tears filled Abigail's eyes. James Vaughn, I think that's perfect. The winter that followed was the happiest of Abigail's life. Despite sleepless nights and the challenges of caring for a newborn in the isolated ranch house, she was filled with a deep contentment. Yancy proved to be a devoted father, just as he had become a devoted husband. He spent hours simply holding James, talking to him about the ranch, about the mountains and the wild creatures that lived among them. He's going to grow up loving this land as much as you do, Abigail observed one evening as she watched Yancy gently rock their son to sleep. Yancy looked up, his face soft with love. He'll grow up knowing he belongs here, that this is his heritage. Just as it's become mine, Abigail said. She crossed the room to stand beside them, placing a hand on James's downy head and another on Yancy's shoulder. Yancy pulled her close, careful not to disturb the sleeping baby. When you stepped off that train, limping and trying so hard to hide it, I thought I'd made a mistake, he admitted. I couldn't imagine how you would cope with ranch life. And now? Abigail asked, though she already knew the answer. Now I know that your strength has nothing to do with how fast you can walk. He kissed her gently. You're the strongest person I've ever known, Abigail, and the best partner I could have asked for. As spring returned to the mountains, bringing wildflowers and the birth of new foals, Abigail stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching Yancy work with a young horse in the corral. James, now 5 months old, was securely nestled in a sling across her chest, his bright eyes taking in everything. Abigail thought back to that day at the train station, to the fear and uncertainty she had felt stepping into a new life with a man she didn't know. She thought of Yancy's first harsh words, "I need a partner, not a dancer," and how they had stung. But he had been right, in a way. What he needed, what they both needed, wasn't perfect wholeness or graceful movement. It was partnership, the willingness to work together, to carry each other when necessary, to build something lasting and beautiful from whatever materials life provided. As if sensing her thoughts, Yancy looked up and waved. Abigail waved back, her heart full. Her leg would always bear the scars of her past, would always cause her pain and slow her steps. But it had brought her here to this man, this child, this life. And for that, she was profoundly grateful. In the golden light of the Colorado afternoon, Abigail knew with absolute certainty that she had found her place in the world, not despite her limp, but perhaps in some mysterious way because of it. And as Yancy walked toward her, his face lighting with love at the sight of her and their son, she knew that he understood this too. They were partners in every sense of the word, their weaknesses and strengths woven together to create a bond stronger than either could have forged alone. And in that partnership, they had found something neither had dared to hope for, a love as vast and enduring as the mountains that surrounded them, as precious and perfect as the child they had created together.